Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. Amazing. We can be here together again tonight. All the complex causes and conditions that had to occur for this karmic ripening, this dependent arising of teacher and teaching and those being taught. It's just amazing. And I just feel so happy and honored to be here with you to talk about what we just keep talking about. And it's this medicine called the stages of the path to enlightenment, looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's very short poem, the foundation of all good qualities, or it's also entitled The Source of All My Good, that it contains everything that Buddha Shakyamuni taught that would allow someone like me with a very deluded mind, with self-cherishing attitude and lots of ignorance, to go from here to a place of perfection, complete enlightenment, with perfect love and compassion, perfect skillful means, power, perfect wisdom, a perfect kind of understanding of everything simultaneously, both the conventional and ultimate truth. This ability comes from a path which removes one's ability to do that. And this path, has to be traversed in a specific order for one to be able to remove these two problems that we have that are keeping us from two things that we want. We have afflictive obstructions in our mind that are keeping us from being able to be free from suffering, keeping us bound to all the different types of suffering that we read about. And then we have the cognitive obscurations, or the obstructions to omniscience, that are in our minds that are keeping us from experiencing the infinite amount of happiness and the complete reliability that a Buddha has. So this pathway that we're learning about allows us to learn how to get closer and closer to that state of being that we crave so much, that we look for so much, that we seek out in ways that won't get us there over and over and over again so much. So it's wonderful that we can discuss this, and specifically in looking at these stages of the path to enlightenment that get one to the state of Buddhahood. We've arrived at the teachings for beings of great capacity. So we've arrived at bodhicitta. We've arrived at this idea of getting your mind to a place where this main mind would be there all the time, that would seek transcendent enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, as it's defined by Lord Maitreya in the Abhisama Alamkara. So this mind of bodhicitta is the only entrance into the Mahayana teachings. It's the only way one enters into the actual path that leads to Buddhahood. You can have cultivated the three highest higher trainings. You could have cultivated various levels of samadhi. But if you don't cultivate this mind that aspires to enlightenment, you won't be able to achieve complete perfection. In reliance upon the three highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, you will be able to achieve an abiding nirvana, but you won't have achieved even the fulfillment of your own needs, let alone all sentient beings' needs. So it's amazing that we have these teachings that will show us exactly how to, if we've built the right foundation, enter into the pathway that makes us into a Buddha and allows us to remove those cognitive obscurations that keep us from perfect reliability, love, compassion, skillful means, power, and perfect wisdom of knowing conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously. And that's something that only the Buddha can do. And it's that ability to see everything in its fullest way that makes him or her the most reliable guide in the universe, because it's not just this kind of knowing of things. It's coupled with this perfect compassion and love that just wants sentient beings to have happiness in the causes of happiness and be free from suffering in the causes of suffering, and is day and night trying to ripen beings into those states. So it's the most kind of solid being in the universe, if you will, that we're learning how to become. And that's really amazing. And this section on bodhicitta that we've entered into, and we'll get more into it when we look at the poem itself by Lama Tsongkhapa. This section on bodhicitta that, we're in the poem where we've arrived at, we've been discussing how one would get bodhicitta, how one would have this mind that aspires to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. How would this occur? This is an effective state of mind. There's got to be a transformative process to go from where I'm at when we look at, what the mind of a bodhisattva is like to that state. There's got to be a transformative process. So we've been looking at one such process called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And I don't know, I think that everyone who's on that I can see was at the teaching, I believe, right after Rinpoche passed away that we gave on, we went over just a small section on bodhicitta of Panchen Sonandrapa's, the master Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. His beautiful commentary on Lord Maitreya's Abhisama Alamkara. And we looked at this section on bodhicitta because I feel that Rinpoche taught it before. And I feel it's just was such a comprehensive section that I wanted to go over it again. And what better way to go over it again than to speak with you about it? So what was it, 2.5 years ago or so, we talked about, what is the basis for getting bodhicitta? What is the mental basis? What's the physical basis? And then, we talked about what are the causes of actually getting it. And then we talked about the kind of general causes and then the specific causes. And within that section, and then we talked about the nature, kind of definition of this kind of bodhicitta of Mahayana mind generation, this definition. And then we talked about divisions, Rapche, and then we talked about benefits. So we went over Panchen Sonandrapa's section on bodhicitta of the general meaning of perfection. And in that second part where we were looking at causes, and it looks at specific causes of getting bodhicitta, we'll find that there are two lineages that luckily trickle down to us that show us exactly how to get bodhicitta, the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So we'll explain there's two lineages. The lineage that we've been talking about of instruction, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga, down through the extensive deeds lineage to Lord Master Salimpa, and then to Lord Atisha and Master Drontompa and so forth, and then down through various Tibetan masters and realized beings, and then arriving in our laps to be able to learn how to get bodhicitta, to be able to learn in a very precise way, without any kind of ambiguity, how one would become a bodhisattva, without saying, oh, it would be wonderful, I'll just tomorrow love everyone and I'll care for everyone. I'm a nice person, I'm a compassionate person, I have a good heart, I'm kind of like a bodhisattva. Not this kind of vague idea of what it might be, a very precise understanding of what the mind would have to go through in order to transform, in order to turn from the self-cherishing attitude to a mind that cherishes others, and cherishes others in the highest degree in a way that is looking to become the most reliable guide in the universe. So it's like turning this heavy barge around. It takes a whole lot of causes and conditions in order for that to occur. It's not something that can just occur without any kind of process that takes place. Think about making something that's very heavy, that's always been wrong, try to start to turn towards right. So this process of the 7-point cause and effect that we've been talking about, again, was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga. and then down through this incredible lineage, and then lands right in our laps because of the kindness of our teachers, because of the kindness of these masters that came before us to be able to share these teachings and show us tricks and ways in which we can turn our minds more towards the way that a Buddha's mind works. Because the only way that we're going to get what we seek, that peace of mind, that satisfaction that we seek, the only way that that's going to occur is if we start turning our mind away from the discrimination that makes us feel bad. And the only way that we can do that is if our discrimination becomes wiser. If it's that discrimination is determined by wisdom and a kind of stable mind, then that's going to lead to us, based on what we've been learning about this cognitive process of development, lead to us feeling better. And it's really that simple, that we learn that it is the self-cherishing attitude that constricts our mind. It's this idea of not being able to discriminate all beings as our mother that makes us see this being as someone awful and allows my mind to think more and more about how awful they really are and exaggerate this awfulness, when I'm looking at something that couldn't possibly have a nature of what I've turned it into. And it's just my kind of maddening, mad mind that turns, you know, things that maybe start at a basis that could be manageable into something really unmanageable. But wisdom does the opposite of that. It makes things more manageable. So it's this cognitive transformation that we learn about in the pre-step of equanimity and the 6 steps of the causes of the 7-step cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment that produce the 7th thing, which is the result. So this is what we've been learning about. We're going to continue to learn about it, and we're going to continue to look at it with a magnifying glass so that we can actually know how to make our minds, how to make that barge of the self-cherishing attitude turn to a 180-degree idea where we want to cherish others more than ourselves, because we've convinced ourselves, because it makes sense that that's the only way we can unconstrict our mind and allow it to flow freely in a way that will allow us to have infinite ease, peace, infinite just happiness, and ability to really do something about the suffering that we see around us, that we inevitably will come to want to not have to see others endure, just like seeing others suffering as our own. And this is a process that changes the way that we relate to the entire universe, and it changes the energy that we give off to those around us, and it creates a ripple effect of goodness. And when we look at the entity, which is called human beings, the human race, sentient beings, if one of us improves our mind and improves the quality of our human beingness, we become more quality human beings. It improves the entity as a whole. And if we improve the quality of human being that we are, those beings around us that will naturally see the improvement in the peace of our mind and our kind of affect, because we've improved the quality of human being that we are, may be inspired to improve themselves as human beings. And that inspiration may lead them to be better human beings, which then makes the human race a much better human race. And if we look at this kind of power that we have in the practice when we sit down at really, really transforming everything, even externally, by our internal mind, we see that the mind is the chief that precedes it all. And if we can work on this mind, then we can figure out a way to be able to have that sense of ease and peace, and that, that full reliability that we're being told we can achieve, and we're being convinced more and more is really realistic. The other lineage, the lineage of the profound view, teaches us the exchanging self with others practice, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni, then down to Arya Nagarjuna, I'm sorry, Buddha Shakyamuni, then to Arya Maitreya. I have a thing coming in on the phone. I just distracted me. The equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Arya Manjushri to Arya Nagarjuna, and then down to Bodhisattva Shantideva, and then down through the lineage. And we again land at Lama Salimpa, Master Salimpa, Lord Atisha, Master Drone Tompa, and then down through the Tibetans out of their kindness and these holy beings, and then into our laps. So we have this other practice called the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice. The 7-point cause and effect practice for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment was the more public teaching given. Some would argue the basis that's kind of needed to really get the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice. Others would argue that they can be done completely separately, and it isn't required as a foundation. I tend to feel when I look at texts like the 8 verses for training the mind, if you see in there, it says mother sentient beings, and that's a Lojong text, and that's a text that's teaching the exchanging self with others practice. So it talks about the kindness of beings in the 7-point thought transformation by Geshe Chikawa. And I know that when we look at equalizing, exchanging self with others, we look at a greater kindness. But wouldn't it make sense to look at it in a small way to get it really right, and then look at it in even broader and broader ways? So either way, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment is a beautiful, beautiful first step. It was the public teaching that was given. And then in a few weeks, once we get done with this practice, we'll talk about equalizing and exchanging self with others, and we'll look at the various Lojong texts, the 8 verses for training the mind, the 7-point thought transformation, the mind training like the rays of the sun. We'll look at Shantideva's section of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where also it speaks in this way of kindness of beings in the past lives. So we'll look at this, and we'll see. You come to the conclusion of what you think. If the 7-point cause and effect is really, really crucial and really, really helpful for the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, look at them both separately, and then we'll look at how we do them together, just as we did when we looked at Panchen Son Andrapa's general meaning of perfection. So I think it's wonderful that we can do this, that we can query into these ideas, and look at how these things can all come together, not so that we can just be like the best talker in the room. Who cares? Who cares how it sounds? Is our mind transforming? Are we able to take all of this information and gather it and just beat down the self-cherishing attitude that's making us not feel good all the time? Because it's the self-cherishing attitude that is the opposite of the wisdom that's determining how we're discriminating things. And if it's being determined by the self-cherishing attitude, then that discrimination is going to be all screwed up, because it's going to be overlaid with an idea that's wrong, that cherishing myself leads me to more happiness than cherishing others. So it's just like the self-grasping ignorance that leads me to feel that there's inherently existent attractive things and inherently existent unattractive things. It's coming from a false premise. So then now all my discrimination is screwed up. So there's layers of screwy discrimination that's going on. And the more and more wisdom that we can put in there, the more and more, information that's right we come in contact with and pay attention to, the more our discrimination will be refined and will become more sophisticated. And that more sophisticated discrimination leads to feeling better, because from discrimination comes how we feel, and then how we act, whether we move towards things or move away from things, whether we're embracing beings or we're wanting to punch them. It all has to do with how we discriminated them and what we felt about that discrimination. And so if we're wisening this up, and I can see a being who I'm finding difficult in the light of affection, and I can see them as a being who's under the sway of afflictions, and it's not them that's the problem. It's the afflictions that the problem, and they're held hostage by the afflictions, and them acting badly towards me isn't a reason for me not to love them and not to have compassion for them, as the great Panchen Losang Yeshe says. Then I'm changing everything. I'm changing the whole program. And that's what this is about. Changing the wrong program into the right program. Since beginningless time, we've been cycling in samsara with the wrong program. We've had to endure the 8 sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant and in being separated from the pleasant, the suffering of not getting what you want, the suffering of the appropriated, forced upon aggregates of body and mind, these ones that are contaminated, we didn't want, that have to feel bad, the suffering of uncertainty, the unsuffering of insatiability. We've learned about this, and this is why we want out. We know that everyone else needs out. The suffering of rebirth and the suffering of having to shuck off bodies again and again, and while we're doing it, going to the higher realms and the lower realms, and not having companions in that whole deal. We learned about this, the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering. Samsara is supposed to look like a disgusted burning pit, but we don't discriminate it as such because we don't have renunciation. And so therefore, because of not having renunciation, we discriminate these things as, oh, maybe something new will make me happier. Maybe if I look this way, I'll be happier. Or wear this clothes, I'll be happier. Or maybe if I have this interesting book to talk about at the coffee shop, I'll be happier. But if it's not a liberating path or a ripening path, it's not one that's really going to lead you to that goal. So we're learning how to make better choices, move towards better things based on better information we're coming in contact with. So that's the point of all of this. And I hope that, as weeks go by, you're utilizing this nectar, the Buddha Shakyamuni says, such is the nectar like Dharma I've discovered, taking this nectar and for what it is, the holiest words in the universe that you could ever hear, and you may not be able to hear again. And here is your entrance into a portal. Here's your entrance into a pathway that will take you to this perfection that you can convince yourself, because the mind is in the nature of clear light. It's unsullied. Its stains are adventitious. You know that you can learn things and better your mind. You know you can become more compassionate and more loving. Why couldn't it come to the point of perfection? If you could remove certain levels, why couldn't you remove all levels? Because you've shown yourself that levels of unknowing are removed when you learn the alphabet. You've shown yourself that levels of compassion can be increased in kindergarten when you didn't want people to suffer. And you said, you don't like being hit, so you know that they don't like being hit. Come on, we learned about all of these things. It's just a matter of really making our minds work in the way that everyone, if they're really honest and is quiet enough for a moment, would say has got to be the way. Love is the way. Compassion has got to be the way to having this tenseness in my mind go away. But I have no idea how to have it. And all anybody's telling me and all my life is just, don't worry, don't be stressed, be happy, have compassion, have love, good luck. And thank goodness I came upon this tradition which showed me this is how you do it, by the way. This is the blueprint to doing it. So many beings suffering, so much trouble in the world right now, so much uncertainty. All we can do is control our mind and our mind's reaction to it, because it's just a couple of clicks away. Investing our mind and becoming angry about the way that the world is, and then having this kind of angry state of mind, and then maybe passing away, and we're just a click away from being that monster or those monsters or being those harmers. We have to always remember that it's the afflictions that are acting out. And we have those same things within our mind to make us into those beings that we feel are monsters. Samsara is not somewhere that running around and having fun really makes sense in once we start to investigate this. And then we find out that this is the real fun. This is the real ease. This is the best way you could ever feel. This is the most untense you could ever be. And you could even be more untenser. And that's what keeps me coming, because I see tiny bits of untensing and transformation take place from little steps I've taken. I don't have shamatha. I don't have renunciation. I don't have bodhicitta. I don't have the wisdom realizing emptiness. But I know what those things are. And I know from a, secondhand knowledge what those things mean accurately. And I've analyzed them to the point where it's a little bit firsthand in the sense of the understanding and the signs and reasoning behind it to a degree. And because of that, proving it to myself that's taken place in some respects. Again, I told you I don't have high realizations. In the littler levels, I'm completely convinced that the higher levels are possible. And this is why there's two kinds of faith: blind faith, as we talked about last week, and faith based on reason. Faith based on reason is something that really, really is a motivator, because you've proven it to yourself that it makes sense. So without further ado, let's begin by setting the most beautiful motivation in the universe, the motivation to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Say to yourself, I'm attending this teaching today to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, to learn whatever it is I need to learn to move one step closer in terms of spiritual maturation to the point where that maturation is completely perfected and there's nothing left to mature. And the fact that that maturing mind, that maturing bodhicitta, that proliferating bodhicitta is empty of inherent existence. I have the chance to be able to mature it to perfection. And these are the two types of Buddha nature: the natural Buddha nature and the proliferating Buddha nature. The proliferating Buddha nature meaning that, this mind can mature. I have states of goodness that can become better, and they can mature and they can change because that proliferating nature is empty of inherent existence. And it, because of that, can have cause and effect work. And without things being empty of inherent existence, cause and effect can't work. This is something that you come to find out if you investigate these teachings, and you can come to start to understand this at an intellectual level. And when things make sense intellectually, it starts to seep in. And when it seeps in more and more and more, as again Jeffrey Hopkins said, this very deep understanding occurs. Yes, I can say that phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they dependently originate all day and night. But if I don't meditate on what that means over and over and over again and let it sink in, and let what the implications of that mean are sink in heavier and heavier and heavier, I won't really have been realizing, on using a correct sign, this emptiness of inherent existence. I won't have, and I don't mean directly, I mean even from an inference, from a deep inference perspective. And that's why the shamatha is so important. And this union of calm abiding and special insight is so important, as we start to want to get deeper and deeper into what this emptiness is about, which is the only medicine, liberating path that can eject us from samsara and make us Buddhas. So this mind that aspires to enlightenment, but recognizing that this guy talking, the talking he's doing, and you are empty of inherent existence, seeing the emptiness of the three spheres of action, agent, and object, and recognizing that you're, as a participant that's empty of inherent existence here, in order to become a Buddha that's empty of inherent existence for the sake of sentient beings that are empty of inherent existence. So combining this and being able to see the essential need for this emptiness within this entity that we're speaking of each time, makes it a much purer form of motivation. If you look into kind of the stages of the Bodhisattva grounds and so forth, So we begin with this motivation of bodhicitta, and let's call upon the merit field, all of the holy beings. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chenrezig himself, form of Chenrezig, the form of Kalachakra, form of all of the deities that he manifests as and gives initiations as. We're so fortunate that he's in our world, wish-fulfilling jewel in our world, our root teachers like Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, these holy beings in our world that have been shaped and influenced these teachings. I have no idea how to say anything if it wasn't for the kindness of him and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche and Demolocha Rinpoche and Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, and now the kind Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche, and then amazing Drepung Losaling Umzala Geshe Aga, who's just is so busy and takes so much time to be able to help us to understand things better. And that's the name of the game for me these days. It's just know a little tiny bit more, just the tiniest bit more, because I want to feel a tiny bit better. And that's the bottom line. And I want to be able to help. I want to be able to be more useful than just kind of guessing and hoping that, you know, my efforts will produce something good. I want to be more sure that my efforts really can be, you know, truly valuable. And the only way I'll know that is if I have clairvoyance and ultimately omniscience. And I won't know really until then. So imagining these inspiring guides in front of us who serve as a, you know, our inspiration to know that we can do this. If we rely upon the pathways that they relied upon, because we have a mind, we can take it to the point that they've taken it. There's no special, you know, minds that, you know, some are permanently screwed up and some aren't. All of our minds are just clear and knowing. We're just, you know, reflecting you know, lighting up and knowing what it is that's been reflected and lit up. And that thing, that mechanism, the mind itself's nature, as we said, is the nature of clear light and unsullied. And the stains that are in it are adventitious. The stains of the, you know, self-cherishing attitude at all of its levels and the self-grasping ignorance at all of its levels. They're add-ons that we can yank out, we can get out. We just have to apply this medicine we're talking about. So these guides are in the space in front of us, all these beings, extensive deeds lineage, profound view lineage, lineage of blessings, all the Tibetan lamas, any, you know, Tibetan lamas, American lamas, Chinese lamas, Japanese lamas, Vietnamese lamas, Sri Lankan lamas, you know, any holy beings that you consider enlightened beings who've, you know, achieved these goals that we're looking to achieve. Imagine them in the space in front of you. And now imagine that you invite all sentient beings here to be your guests, to share this teaching with them so that they can be able to hear exactly what they need to hear to be able to evolve, to be able to achieve the same exact goals that you have. Everyone wants happiness. Everyone wants to be free from suffering. No one wants to have only, you know, a certain percentage of happiness. Everyone wants complete happiness. No one wants to only be free from suffering sometimes. Everyone wants to always be free from suffering. And these teachers on the stages of the path to enlightenment show us exactly how to achieve that. So imagine that you bring everyone here in the universe to share that with them. And specifically, I'd like to say the name of a professor, Don Gale, who was a very close student of Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. When I translated, he was week after week after week, maybe decades at those teachings whenever he could attend. So he passed away. And I'd just like you to think of him when think of Professor Don Gale when you're inviting the merit, inviting all sentient beings here to be your guest, and you're thinking of, you know, sharing this teaching with others. Just share this teaching as Rinpoche, Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, was able to, because he understood how to connect to all sentient beings, as he was able to connect with Professor Don Gale. Imagine that we're connecting with him, and we're making aspirations that he connects with Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche immediately, meets always in all lifetimes with qualified Mahayana teachers. Manifestations of the mind of Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, the pure mind of his root teacher, May he always, always be in that loving care. And may we always be in the loving care also. It's not that we're just making these aspirations. We talk about when people pass away, it's if we aren't the ones, as if it's something that we won't, have people talking about us about. So, may we all never be separated from our perfect teachers. So we invite all the sentient beings here, friends, neutral beings, people we find difficult, people we consider enemies, people we consider monsters, people we consider distasteful. Think about history. Think about those beings and understand that they're just under the sway of afflictive emotions. And we have the same exact afflictions in our mind right now, and they just haven't manifested as those kinds of beings. And we can. All we have to do is stop breathing and just have the wrong mental state. If this craving and grasping occur, wrong mental state, and our potential existence and our completing karmas will maybe look like the things we really couldn't even imagine seeing in a being we couldn't imagine being. And we won't have any control over it because we haven't gotten control of the afflictions. And here we're learning how to do so. What else should we be doing? Hell, hungry ghosts, animal, human beings, demigods, gods in the form realm, gods in the desire realm, form and formless realm, all in beings. Invite them all here to be your guest. And let's imagine that the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha, Vulture Peak Mountain, where the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the perfection of wisdom, took place. And let's imagine that all these beings that we've invited here are able to hear this teaching in the language of the gods, Nagas and Yakshas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be. I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Imagine from that blessing from the King of Aspirations that all the sentient beings that you've gathered here are able to hear this teaching, hear the Heart Sutra, hear and be able to see as if they're right there, this play going on between Buddha Shakyamuni and Lord Chenrezig and the master Shariputra. Imagine that this play is going on, being blessed by the Buddha, and this teaching on the definitive truth of the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena, and the hidden teaching going on of the five paths, the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Imagine that you're hearing this nectar-like Dharma. What the nectar-like Dharma that Buddha Shakyamuni discovered was this non-affirming negative that all phenomena lack inherent existence. Clear light, non-composite. And we're able to get a glimpse of what the Buddha said, finding no one to fathom this teaching in silence, I'll retire into the woods. And we're able to get little glimpses of what this nectar-like Dharma is that the Buddha talked about, this clear light, non-composite. Luckies. We're the lucky ones. And really rejoice in this fact that we're the lucky ones. We have to understand what this Heart Sutra means. Not kind of means, really means. What is ultimate analysis? What is conventional analysis? What's the conventional world able to know that exists? What goes beyond its kind of parameters of understanding? We have to know what this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge means if we want to achieve nirvana, if we want to achieve Buddhahood. And when I say nirvana, I mean an abiding nirvana, because Buddhahood is a non-abiding nirvana. Either way, we want the liberation or foe destroyer state of a hero or solitary realizer, or we want to have the state of a Buddha. We must know exactly what the Buddha is talking about here. And the Buddha is never saying that phenomena don't exist. Nihilism was not a complex theory. It had been taught a lot and will be taught again. What was taught here is much, much more subtle than that. What was taught here is that, yes, things do exist, but they don't exist in the way that you apprehend them to, or they appear to you to. They don't exist that way. But they exist in a way, and the investigation that the Buddha says we must get into shows us how they don't exist and then helps us conclude how they do exist. And if we can start to have our minds apprehend things in a way that tallies more with how they actually are and what they are not, then the concrete appearances that lead us to concrete ideas that things are concretely attractive and concretely awful won't be able to be started up. And then the running after concretely wonderful things and doing anything and beating anyone out of my way to get to those concretely wonderful things won't occur. And when that contaminated action doesn't occur, then the cause for samsara isn't there. And if the only way to get rid of that contaminated action is to trace it back to its root, which is self-grasping ignorance. And the antidote to self-grasping ignorance is the wisdom realizing emptiness. The wisdom that the Buddha taught here is the emptiness of inherent existence of everything in the universe. Even emptiness, even ultimate truth, is empty of inherent existence. Emptiness is the conventional truth of emptiness. Emptiness of emptiness is the ultimate truth of emptiness. And emptiness is ultimate truth. So anyway, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way, he saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita addressed in this way? Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Aga samara jajandara samaraya ve deata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhizoa baba gonja sanji kaye dembe doji she lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji dragi baji medu biji danji jedin gorie zo ha kirin donja jeju shewada midun nube jandandra wadan domba junjin bonzon zonjoji dashi de janden da de le jo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. And in further supplication, let's include Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good. In our mandala offering as supplication, when we look at the 6 preparations and we look at the mandala offering in the 6th preparation, we see there's supplications that we make so that we may be able to, from right where we're sitting, be able to realize these teachings. So let's include this supplication, which the source of all my good is, in our mandala offering. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him or her in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow them with all my strength and reverence. Bless me to realize that the excellent life I've found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, every one my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty, when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to always keep them, even at the cost of my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay. So here it says where we've landed. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. So I thought, I'm sorry, that was the dedication, wrong page. But when we go to the section that we're actually in, I apologize, on bodhicitta, it talks about, I have slipped and fallen. Okay. Erase that part from your brain. We enter the Mahayana path here. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see every living being, everyone my own mother has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. So I thought we'd look at where we kind of started with all of this. We started by looking at Pabonka Rinpoche's very short commentary on this very short poem by Lama Tsongkhapa, The Source of All My Good, the Foundation of All Good Qualities. And we came to the conclusion by looking at it that the general outline talks about, you know, how this text is really laid out after the preliminaries. So Pabonka Rinpoche is so kind to show us exactly, how these things are laid out within these 14 stanzas. And he says that the first stanza deals with the very root of the path of how to take on a lama and serve him or her properly. And then from stanza 2 all the way up to stanza 12, we're dealing on how to train your mind once you've taken a lama. And then stanza 13 dealing with the request so you can attain favorable circumstances for succeeding in the path, stop everything that might prevent you from doing so. And then the 14th stanza doing with a prayer that in all your future lives you'll be taking care of a lama. I was thinking of these categories and how important it is at the beginning that we have this teacher, and that we find out that this is the most important thing, to have the teacher with the right information, that we make sure that we don't want our minds to ever be separated from such a thing in any life that we have. And that's what that 14th stanza talks about, so that we're able to gain the strength to be able to have conviction and go through all the final various levels and paths. So this particular section, when we look at what Pabonka Rinpoche Dorje Chung says is like, okay, how to train once you've taken a lama, says there's this kind of precept of advice on taking the essence of the life. And then it shows how you take the essence of the life by actually engaging in the practices for beings of three capacities. So we see the teachings for beings of, if we're speaking specifically separate, the teachings for beings of small scope, the teachings for beings of medium scope, and the teachings for beings of great scope. But what we're looking at this in terms of one practitioner trying to achieve complete Buddhahood, in terms of one vehicle, in terms of, hey, I want to achieve Buddhahood. So we're looking at it in terms of this continuum, So when we're looking at it in those terms, we say the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. Because we know that in order to get this step of bodhicitta right, we have to have realized the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity. We have to have realized death and impermanence. We have to have realized karma and its results, and have to have realized how to kind of purify things and so forth through opponents in order to, be able to achieve what we want, which is higher realm rebirth. In this case of this teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. But we will have to have, and also refuge is in there too, I apologize. So, but we will have to have this firm foundation in understanding death and impermanence and reflecting on future lives and refuge and karma and its results. We'll have to have a firm foundation in that to get to even the medium scope. And then what we see the medium scope's indispensable in understanding this, because it says, I've slipped and fallen in the sea of this suffering life. And we're in the higher realms of cyclic existence right now as human beings, and we didn't even touch that in the small scope. So now we're realizing something that's occurring to us that we didn't realize in the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, and that's that no matter where you are in cyclic existence, lower realms or higher realms, it's a prison. It's something that is not good. It's all the happiness that you think is happiness in cyclic existence is bait that keeps you here. It's the door to every pain that you have. It's the door into more of the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and 3 types of suffering, and having a lack of freedom and being forced into those things over and over and over again endlessly until there's an opponent forced to stop it. So we see in the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, this idea of how to do that and the practice of the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom as a means to make that stop, to make samsara stop, because you don't want it to be there. And now you lead with this idea. And I'm going to read right from Pabunka Rinpoche Dorje Chang's commentary, because he does like a word commentary on this. And I think it's great to start with. And we'll see where we get to from here. But I saw it just in my passing and thought, wow, this is really fantastic. Why not look at this stanza and break it down and how, how it's broken down here. So it says, the meaning of the root text here then is follows. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. That is, I have dropped into the ocean of the cycle of births. So the cycle of birth, cycling within the 6 realms of cyclic existence, turning like buckets on a water wheel, going from high to the low, being strapped to this thing, turning because of, these karma and afflictions, and at the root, this real mastermind affliction of the self-grasping ignorance, just forcing us into this circle again and again and again. This ocean, that cyclic existence is compared to this ocean, these 6 realms to an ocean, a vast ocean that we can't even imagine the size of. So it says, I've slipped and fallen into the sea of, and then Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary says, of pain of this suffering life. So I've slipped and fallen into the sea of the pain of this suffering life. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, I've slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. So Pabunka Rinpoche Dorje Tang adds the pain of this suffering life. That is, I have dropped into the ocean of the cycle of births. And again, we talked about the 6 types of suffering, the uncertainty, the insatiability, the cycle of rebirth, the ascending from the shucking off bodies and going from the high to the low. You learned all of this in the medium scope. And if you didn't, you don't have the material to work with here. You don't know how to get bodhicitta because you haven't even dreamt of your own suffering, as Lord Shantideva says. I can't even guess how deep it is, nor how far its edges are. So we talk about it, we name it as 6 realms, we try to come up with like a way to understand it, but we can't even begin to understand how vast this like immense amounts of sentient beings and how vast the universes are. The great sea waves of my deeds and the afflictions of my mind, of birth and getting old and death, rage around me. Hold on, I've got to do this weird thing. I did it. I'm not a robot. So, okay. So I really like this. So I'm going to read it. I can't even guess how deep it is, not how far its edges are. So how deep is it? How far out does it go? I can't even imagine this expanse that I'm saying is cyclic existence. The great sea waves of my deeds and the afflictions of my mind, of birth and getting old and death, rage around me. So we're looking at this blazing fire we're in of cyclic existence, this prison, this raging of birth, aging, sickness, and death, not getting what you want, separating from the pleasant, meeting with the unpleasant, suffering of being forced without your control into this situation. And those other uncertainties we talked about, raging around you. A great host of ruthless creatures living in the water rise up and attack me constantly. These are the three sufferings: the suffering of outright pain, the suffering of pleasure that changes the bait that keeps you in cyclic existence, the contaminated happiness, and the suffering of simply being alive, the pervasive compounded suffering. They rip at me, they torture me relentlessly, unceasingly. And the same thing's happening to every living being. Every one of them has in the past been my own mother. So it says in the root text, it says, I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, every one my own mother has fallen into. And Pabunka Rinpoche says, at the same thing is happening to every other living being, every one of them. So everyone other than myself. So everyone other than myself has this same experience going on. And every one of those beings who is other than myself is my mother, has been my mother, so is my mother. Every one of them has in the past been my own mother, Pabunka Dorji Cham says. In the beginningless string of lives I have lived through, they cared for me and sheltered me with incredible kindness. So we've been looking at that, the incredible kindness of our mothers. In the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, it's step 2. I must learn to see how all these fellow living beings have fallen in too, how they too have been thrown down into misery by this mass suffering. And then I must resolve to take on myself the task of freeing them all from every pain and from every cause of pain. I must assure they reach every form of happiness. I will do it myself alone without waiting or depending on anyone else. Beyond everything, I myself will see to it that everyone then climbs to the state of a Buddha. In short, said Lama Tsongkhapa, we are asking our Lama, Lama Tsongkhapa, for the ability to find fierce feelings of love and compassion, states of mind where we can bear not a moment longer to watch our fellow mother beings live so bereft of happiness and so plagued by suffering. We are asking that these feelings inspire in us the highest aspiration, the true and uncontrived wish for enlightenment. And we are asking our Lama for the ability to meditate upon this wish and practice it and make it totally perfect right here on this very seat before we stand up again. We're trying to invoke a feeling that matters, that makes us change. And we have all the instructions to allow this to occur, to make this occur. And when we look at the word blessing in Tibetan, we have to be very careful because we know the Buddha does not wash away negativities with water, nor does he remove miseries with hands, nor are his spiritual realizations transferred to students. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. This word blessing, I need a blessing, is shilap in Tibetan. And shinlup, the shin part means magnificent potential. Lap means transform, transforming your magnificent potential. When your afflictions decrease and your positive states of mind increase, this is a blessing that has come about by your teacher's teaching, by the information, by the truth of suchness that's been taught. This magnificent potential is transformed. It's not magic. Of course, there's causes and conditions. And when we meet with the right teacher who can teach us exactly what we need because they know it, because they're so well trained and they have the states of mind to know exactly what we need, they know how we can open up certain kind of karmic imprints that we had that will allow us to connect to maybe our practices in a stronger way, so they know what to say or when to say it and how to say it and who to say it to. But it's our job to have this information really sink in so that the blessing of the transformation of our magnificent potential takes place. The blessing that is the transformation of our magnificent potential takes place, because we know what is Buddha nature. It's our potential that we have right now to be a Buddha, that every single sentient being in the universe has the potential to become a Buddha. Doesn't have a little Buddha living inside of them already, with 32 major marks and 80 minor marks. I won't agree with that, but I will agree with it. That potential is there. The seed of perfection is there and just needs to be ripened, just needs to be matured. This gold, this mind that's can expand to everything in the universe is just constricted by the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And that's what's keeping it. That's what's binding it. It's those states of ignorance, of apprehension, and the appearance of inherent existence that's occurring because beginningless time of the attachment to things, like believing things are inherently existent in a way that's so concrete that we can't do anything about it or transform our lives, like this concrete, like a fist, and we have this potential to change, and that's the only way that we'll really be happy and have a peace of mind that we say we all want. So we're so fortunate to have little texts like this with lots of wisdom that we can use for our movement. So we've learned. Okay, so we're saying we want to get this thing called aspiring bodhicitta, which makes you a bodhisattva. And according to Lord Maitreya and the Abhisamalamkara, it's the wish to achieve the highest enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And this is what is the entrance to the Mahayana. And the moment you generate this real mind, not in a contrived way, that doesn't go, this mind that's a main mind, when you actually generate this main mind that cherishes others more than yourself, that's really there day and night, that's there. When you generate this main mind, it will have come about by certain things that had to occur for that to generate. And when you generate this main mind, you will be called a child of the ones gone to bliss, a bodhisattva. So we've been looking at the causal kind of lineage for getting it, called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, that we know from the beginning of the teaching and from a million times that I said it before. This was passed down in the extensive deeds lineage from Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga and down to us. So we've been learning about all sentient beings are our mother. So we've been convinced of this, hopefully, or we will in the future. We have the potential to become convinced of this because this is something that is convincing, and it is something that tallies with the truth once we start to meditate upon it. So we have these things that will allow us to, learn. So we've been looking at this third step, wishing to repay the kindness of mothers. We've come to the conclusion that everyone's equally someone we'd help. We've come to the conclusion that every being is our mother. We've come to the conclusion that they've been extremely kind. And now we're coming to the conclusion that we must repay their kindness, and learning, well, how would we do that? What kind of repayment? What would that be? What would that cost? And it talks about here. So we're going to just start from the Quam right after, just kind of reread where we kind of left off and go back to Master Baba Vega's quote, Acharya Baba Vega's quote. Okay, so the Quam. How can you repay their help? So all sentient beings are my mother. I want to repay their kindness. Okay, so they've taken care of me when I was most vulnerable. They put my needs before their own. They do anything for me. How do I repay a being like that? Okay, so no matter how much wealth and happiness your mothers obtain in cyclic existence, it all deceives them. Okay, so it's not that way. I'm not in the business of trying to deceive those in order to, repay them. That's not the best way. Thus, you must repay their help, thinking, formerly my mothers were seriously wounded because the madness of the afflictions possessed them. Then I produced a variety of sufferings for those beings who were already suffering, as if I had applied sea salt to their deep wounds. Now I will establish these beings who lovingly help me in the happiness of liberation or nirvana. And then we have a quote from Acharya Baba Vega's Heart of the Middle Way, and we talked about Acharya Baba Vega is around 6th century, who made comments about Acharya Buddhapalita's explanation of the four, the kind of negating the four modes of intrinsic production that Arya Nagarjuna spoke about when he said there's no production from self, no production from other, no production from both, and no causeless production, talking about no intrinsically existent production from self, other, both or causelessly. And Baba Vega did not like the syllogism that Acharya Baba Vega did not like the syllogism that Acharya Buddhapalita made with respect to intrinsic production from other. He didn't think that the syllogism met what it needed to in terms of the three modes, in terms of the property of the subject. He felt that there was something wrong, and if you fixed it, there was something wrong. And he felt that the syllogism wasn't getting at the Samkhya view, which is what the intrinsic arisal from self, or intrinsic production from self, negation is trying to negate. So Acharya Baba Vega says that Buddhapalita's kind of syllogism he makes about, things not, intrinsically arising from self, because production would be pointless and endless. He says Acharya Buddhapalita syllogism wasn't good. He leaves out the full syllogism where he says, production again would be meaningless, again would be endless, again would be meaningless and endless. So anyway, you can look at the debate. It's in Meditation on Emptiness by, again, Jeffrey Hopkins, and find out Baba Vega didn't like Buddhapalita's syllogism, and he thought that it contradicted, the view of Arya Nagarjuna at the end of the day. And then our Acharya Chandrakirti comes along, sees Acharya Baba Vega's criticism. None of these people even talk to each other ever, by the way. Sees Acharya Baba Vega's criticism, and Acharya Chandrakirti defends Acharya Buddhapalita's position and shows how it is actually correct. So yeah, so that's who Acharya Baba Vega is, and he's part of the Profound View lineage, and he's considered the opener of the Chariot Way of Middle Way Autonomy School, the Svatantrika Madhyamaka School, who believes that things are not truly existent, but conventionally they intrinsically exist. Let me repeat that. Acharya Baba Vega, who's a holder of the middle way view, but middle way autonomy view, states that things are not truly existent, but they intrinsically exist conventionally. They intrinsically exist. So Acharya Chandrakirti, the Prasangika school, middle way Prasangika school, says, I agree that things don't truly exist, but I believe that that is synonymous with things don't inherently exist. When you say things don't truly exist, I hear they don't inherently exist, and that's what Buddha meant. So this is the subtlety we have to figure out. Fun. So from the heart of the middle way, it says, furthermore, like applying salt to wounds of those who have been possessed by madness of their afflictions, I created suffering for those sick with suffering. So I considered an enemy, and they were acting out because of their afflictions and having an immense amount of suffering. And then I yelled back at them and put salt in their wounds because I didn't see them as sick with suffering. I didn't discriminate them wisely as my mother who's possessed, who's crazed at this moment. Now, what else is there other than nirvana to repay with those who in other lives help me with love and service? So this is how I used to do it. I used to repay them with more suffering, and I can't repay them with wealth. Of course, I have to be generous and I have to help with material things and love and protection, but the real way I can protect sentient beings is by teaching the Dharma. It is said that a kindness unrepaid weighs more than the heavy burden of the ocean together with Mount Meru, and that repaying others' kindness occasions the praise of the learned. So then we have a quote from the verses from the Naga's King's Drum. And it says, so normally, right, we read these books and we say, oh, yeah, the Naga King Drum, whatever that is. So I'll tell you what that is. So I looked it up, the 84,000. Thank you so much to the 84,000 Translation Project, doing incredible work. Zonsar Kensei Rinpoche and just incredible, incredible people on that program, working so hard to make sure that the Buddhist sutras or the words of the Buddha are being translated. And so there's a summary of what this is, and this is translated. So the verses of the Naga's King's Drum. So what is this? Okay, so it is Buddha's narration of a tale from when in one of his past lives, he was a Naga King Drum. And while traveling with his younger brother, so he's a Naga. So this is Buddha Shakyamuni remembering, hey, I remember this time when I was a bodhisattva, I was a Naga. He's telling this story. Buddha taught a lot through his previous lives. So he would tell stories of this when he was a bodhisattva and what he did, like when he was in the giving the generosity of his body to the tigress and her cubs. He tells this story and this shows, in the tigress, it's a sutra. He shows how, this bodhisattva gave his body, and then it comes to be explained that these became his first disciples when he was Shakyamuni Buddha. It shows how so Buddha Shakyamuni teaches a lot through his previous life stories, and we see the Jataka tales, Arya Shura, shows us. So, and puts together. So he, at this point in his previous life as a bodhisattva, he's a Naga king. His name's Drum. And he's traveling with his younger brother, Tambur. And they come under some verbal attack. Someone starts screaming at them. Okay, so this sounds like our world, right? We think, oh, the times were so good back then. We get back to the golden age. No, people were screaming at people when Buddha Shakyamuni was 2,600 years ago was Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is before that because it was a previous life. So, long time ago, people are screaming at each other. This isn't a new thing. So Buddha's saying, well, how do you deal with such a thing? Do you scream back? Is that going to make sense? So this is what this sutra is about. So the Buddha's saying, hey, I think that this bodhisattva was onto something, who gives some advice to his younger brother. And I'm going to teach you what he said. So they come under verbal attack by a Naga named Drumbeat. Okay, so there's another Naga. His name's Drumbeat. He's a real jerk, apparently, screaming and yelling and attacking the Naga King Drum, who was Buddha Shakyamuni in a previous life, who was a bodhisattva, and his younger brother, just attacking. And Tambur's anger. So Drum, the bodhisattva's younger brother, gets mad, as we see. People yelling at each other. People are mad. People disagree. I'm mad at you. I don't like you. Bifurcation, discrimination as you, not as my mother, you as my enemy. It's what causes us to feel so upset and not feel right, not feel good. We have a screwed up discrimination, and the Buddha came to tell us why and what to do about it. So Tenber's anger, his little brother, goes nuts at the mistreatment, and he wants to retaliate. And this prompts Drum, the Bodhisattva, to counsel Tambar on the virtues of patience and nonviolence in the face of aggression and abusiveness. Wow, this is going to take a lot from my mind to be able to, in the face of maybe if someone just says something kind of offhandedly, but someone who's attacking me aggressively, abusively, to be able to see them in the light of love and compassion, this is going to be a big step. So then Tambar wants to retaliate. And then the Bodhisattva starts talking about nonviolence and patience and the benefits of patience and the downfalls of anger. Through a series of didactic aphorisms, he advises his little brother to meet disrespect and persecution with serenity, patience, compassion, and insight in order to accomplish what is best for oneself and others. The Buddha now recounts King Drum's wise counsel as a helpful instruction for his followers. So Lama Tsongkhapa is so kind to quote this, and it's so kind that the 84,000 Committee works on these things to help us see that Buddha Shakyamuni was really showing us how to discriminate things differently, how to kind of determine how our mind was going to determine our wisdom, our calmness, our concentration, all these things were going to determine how we discriminate things. And when we see the benefits of patience and the downfalls of anger, and we see that we're going to feel bad with anger, we're going to feel better with patience, we're going to not put salt in the wound of others with patience, and we're going to put salt in the wound of others with anger, and that all sentient beings are my mother who've been so kind to me, how could I imagine responding in a way that I'm making them hurt while they're already hurt? So this is the wisdom that Buddha came to tell us about, to use to change our discrimination, not to be able to say that bad is good and everything's good, not to say that, to be able to, as Master Shantideva says, have that space to remain like a piece of wood and make an intelligent reaction based on love and compassion. And that may be to use stern words, and that may be to protest. But if you can't protest from the basis of love and compassion, it's time to move away from the object of your affliction until you can. Really. Because if you're just angry and you want to defeat and you don't do it because you want everyone to have happiness and the causes of happiness, including those you're protesting against, then it's time to move away from the object of your anger for a moment or two, because it's not going to help, because all you're going to do, because you have anger still, you're going to have anger if you're next to something that makes you angry. And if you're there doing that, your inability to control your mind is going to exaggerate it more and more and more and more and more, and make it to the point where you're suffocated yourself and you can't do anything for anyone else in that state. So the Buddha says in the verses from the Naga's King Drum, the ocean, Mount Meru, and the earth are not a burden to me, whereas not repaying others' kindness is a great burden to me. So think about this. The Buddha's in his previous life, he's a bodhisattva named Drum. He's talking to his younger brother, and he's saying this, hold on, Drum. I know it seems like we should punch this guy and scream at this guy and go nuts right now and make this guy as sad as possible. Or this girl, I don't know who's causing the troublemaker. I don't know who the troublemaker is in this case. I know it seems like we should punch and we should scream, but that would be putting salt in the wound of somebody who's been so kind to me and I've merely forgotten. We learn that we just forgot because of the process of death and rebirth. We forgot this kindness that occurred. We learned this at the beginning of this section. We just forgot. this kindness. And now someone who was so kind to us that is our mother, we're now putting salt in the wound. So Drome, younger brother, this doesn't make sense. Let's not act like this, because this doesn't make sense, and this isn't going to allow you to achieve happiness, and all it'll do is make a cause for another screaming person to come at you in the future, because results are concordant with causes. And the only thing that could make another screaming abusive person come is if you react in a way that is concordant with making another screaming abusive person come. Whereas not repaying others' kindness is a great burden to me. The learned praise persons whose minds are not excited, they can remain like a piece of wood. I added that from whose minds are not excited, who recognize and repay others' deeds, and who do not waste others' kindness. We'll stop here. Wow. There's a lot we can learn, and we can make our minds just so beautiful. And we can make it so we don't have to be so dissatisfied. And we can make it so that everything that we endeavor in, if we could get this bodhicitta they talk about, everything would become a cause for enlightenment. It says, like, even if the bodhisattva is distracted or, working for someone's needs, there's stories where a bodhisattva became drunk, even when drunk, was able to work every moment of those moments for the benefit of all sentient beings. And this isn't like a story of using it as nectar to transform you into bliss. And I'm not talking like that. I'm talking about circumstances where it occurred, and that it's just saying that the bodhisattva's mind can never, ever, ever not be causing Buddhahood. The bodhisattva's mind, once he or she gets bodhicitta, even when going to the bathroom, it says, you're creating virtue. You're thinking of, fulfilling the needs of beings, even with your feces and with your urine, because there's beings who feed on filth. We just can't see them, but bodhisattvas have learned about these beings, and some of them can see them and actually feed them while they're going to the bathroom with the scents, the bad smells of their feces. Imagine being born. If we don't do the right thing, we'll be born into a place where we're feeding off the smells of feces. Maybe it's a fairy tale. Do you want to bet that and be sure? Are you willing to bet right now? Be so sure. Are you sure that there isn't a state of being where you might feed off the smell of feces if you don't get this right? Are you sure there's not a state of being that your great-grandmother isn't in right now where she's feeding off the smell of feces? Can you be sure? I can't be sure. And I know I certainly don't want that for myself or for others. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by this mantra of Vajrasattva. Om Benza Sato Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sato Seno Vajishadida Meva Sutagaya Meva Subagaya Meva Anurata Meva Savasiti Me Pracha Savakama Suchi Me Kitimchi Ankuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Savatata Gata Benza Mame Muka Benza Bava Maha Samaya Sapa Ah Om Hey. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama. Jorama Jorama Jojarama Jajagala Rajamo Ramo Achadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong. Remembering Professor Don Gale, in your thoughts, may he always be connected with perfect Mahayana teachers, always connected with Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. Professor Don, you were really, if you can, in the Bardo and you're hearing any of this, rejoice in the fact that you were such a great guy and Rinpoche cared about and loved you so much. And I'm sure Rinpoche's taking care of you and in the intermediate state or wherever you are, and will take care of you in all of your lives. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of Hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors to traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. A long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains. You are the source of all benefit and help for beings. All powerful Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara's ends. And the prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, written by me. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music, purified by Om 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 Om. The purity, the rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now the sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. And I just want to comment on one part of this where it says that you told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness. This isn't just like an idea, or Rinpoche talked about, always continuing to study, so entreating us to continue our studies. He actually looked into my eyes and said this to me with a tear look in his eyes, and just kept saying, "Don't stop." That was the message, entreating all of us to continue our studies. I was there with him in the last month of his life when he said this. He said, I know what it's like. All of my teachers passed away, and he knew this was going to hurt. And he wanted to make sure that that pain, that hurt, wasn't something that stopped me from practicing and getting more teachers and learning what the next things I needed to learn were. That pain can't stop us. We are all going to lose our teachers or our lives first. One thing's going to happen, but we can't let the pain stop us if we're the ones still here. We have to continue our studies so that we can transform into beings just like those teachers that we revered so much, that maybe aren't in this world sitting in front of us right now. But I can say for sure that I'm more connected now to Rinpoche in some ways, than I was ever when he was here right in front of me, because it just is what it is. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate all of your kindness and your patient listening, and I hope it's been helpful. Please apply these teachings to your life and make them, matter. Make them for the purpose of what Buddha Shakyamuni brought us them for, and that's to have happiness, have peace of mind, and be able to really take care of each other, and really be able to help one another, and not have so much bifurcation that says, I'm more important than you. I should cherish myself more than I should cherish you, because that's poison. And that poisonous demon inside of us that tells us that is just a naked ghost that comes to us empty-handed to rob us of everything that we want. Thank you.